Previously on A Contract Marriage with My Boss, and now, Part 2 begins.
1 year ago, Sarah attended an interview to work for this company. The final interviewer was Charles. When she had met him, he was reclining on his chair with his fingers interlocked on his abdomen. He was so casual, and it was his casual attitude that made him distinctive. His eyes were so delicate, his thin lips were slightly exposing his beautiful teeth. Under the sunlight, he appeared to be an impossibly handsome man. From that moment, she was attracted to him. After the interview, she became his personal secretary, so she had more opportunities to be in contact with him and marvel at his outstanding business talents. Eventually, she fell in love with him. A man of such high quality was always easy to be loved by women, and Sarah was no exception. It had never occurred to her, though, that he was a devil. He knew she loved him, but he still toyed with her emotions, as if he was happy to see that she lived an unhappy life. She thought about the situation at the hotel again. Her body was still bruised from his love bites, while the faint scent of humility lingered on her skin. She bowed her head timidly, with her hands clutching the folder and pen tightly. She didn't know why she still persisted. If she continued to stay here, he would only bully her even more. She had already been desperate this morning. Would she still wait for that cruel-hearted man? Was it all worth it? Sarah thought for a long time. Then she looked at the closed door of the conference hall, and there was no sign of anyone about to leave. She bit her lower lip and finally turned around to go back to her office, sure that she had made up her mind. She had decided that she was going to resign. She must leave him. She would no longer stay here and be humiliated. Once she was back in her office, Sarah began to write her letter of resignation. While she was writing it, her eyes began to well up with tears. She had persisted for a whole year, and after all that, she was giving up. However, what could she do if she didn't give up? That man had never loved her. After finishing the resignation letter, she found a box and started to put all her things inside it. Her assistant Nancy was not in the office, so there was no one to stop her. She quickly packed her things up, then sat on the desk and waited for Charles to return from his meeting. After about an hour of waiting, Charles finally came back. Sarah stood up and greeted him back to the office as usual. However, the moment that Charles saw her, he said to her coldly, "How can you leave during the meeting? What if I order something?" His tone was accusatory and hurtful. Sarah was so upset. With her head lowered, she said, "Sir, I have thought for a long time. I still feel that I cannot adapt to this job." Charles was about to step into his own office, but upon hearing her words, he stopped and turned around to stare at her. "What?" Sarah dared not to look at him, but bit her lower lip and answered, "I want to resign." Charles stared at her for a long time, then smiled coldly. "Are you sure you're not joking?" Sarah didn't look at him. She replied firmly, "I'm not joking. This is a decision that I have carefully considered." Charles sneered as he fixed his tie. Calmly, he walked into his office and said, "I'm just going to ignore what you've said. Get back to work." Sarah finally raised her head, followed him into his office and said, "I'm not joking. I have already written my letter of resignation. I'm very serious." With this, she handed him the letter. Turning around to inspect her and the letter, Charles laughed. "Except me and this corporation. Who is going to give you a job with both a high salary and good welfare? Do you think you can live a better life after leaving me? Your sister is still at school. Without any parents, who will help you afford her tuition? Besides, you are just a graduate from an average university. Where can you find a job as good as this?" Charles' words hit Sarah like a bullet. She bit her lower lip and said confidently, "Even if it means I starve to death, I still want to resign. It's better than being humiliated and insulted here." She put her letter of resignation on his table. "Are you still mad about what I did in the hotel?" Charles stared at her as if he was trying to gauge her reaction. Sarah, however, didn't respond to him, which made him angry. In a fit of rage, Charles took the letter and quickly tore it apart. Shocked, Sarah shouted at him, "You! Why do you tear my resignation apart?" "I have the right to refuse my employee's resignation," said Charles with a wry smile. "You are too much. Am I?" Charles walked in front of her, pinched her chin, and asked, "Sarah, do you love me?" "Let go of me." Sarah slapped his hand and turned her head away from him. Charles continued to pinch her chin and said, "Sarah, don't you want a romantic love? I'll give it to you. From now on, you will be my girlfriend. I'll satisfy you and give you everything you want. Then, will you still want to resign? Sarah was totally shocked and stared at him, then whispered, "What did you say?" "I say, from today on, you will be my girlfriend. I will respect you and try my best to give you what you want. So, do you still leave me?" "What?" Sarah continued to stare at him in disbelief and continued, "You want me to be your girlfriend? Well, isn't that what you always wanted?" Charles looked at her. Sarah was in shock and didn't know how to respond. After a long time, she answered, "You're not joking? You think I am joking?" Charles stared at her. Although he looked like he was still playing, his tone was serious. Sarah looked at him for a long time, with hundreds of thoughts rushing through her mind. Didn't he always humiliate her for pleasure? Why did he give in to her so quickly? It was all so confusing. Why has he now decided that he wants a romantic relationship with her? Or was this just another cruel way of teasing her? This man was so abominable. He never made her happy. Her fist gradually clenched, and her eyes became colder. She said coldly, "Are you going to humiliate me in a new way? You just want to get my heart, and then throw it away, don't you? Do you think that humiliating me to satisfy your amusement is funny?" It had never occurred to Charles that she would react like this. She was so neurotic. He had revealed his true feelings and wanted to start from the beginning again, but her reaction made him angry. He said aggressively, "Is that all I am to you, just a bad guy without a conscience?" Sarah stared at him without responding, trying to determine whether his words were true or not. Charles felt so angry. He shook his head and said, "Well." Then he raised his hand and swore, "My words are all true, do you believe it?" Sarah was still unsure if she could trust him. Finally, Charles said, "I have told you. If you don't trust me, I won't force you to stay. If you really want to resign, I won't stop you anymore. Just don't live to regret giving up such a good job and an excellent boyfriend." Saying this, he turned around to leave the office. Sarah hesitated, staring at his back. She was totally at a loss. After all, she still loved him. She misunderstood him, so she said something hurtful. To her surprise, he was so sincere. If he really left, she would be sad. However, she didn't know how to call him back. Unexpectedly, Charles stopped and then turned around to look at her. "Are you going to resign? Are you sure?" Looking at him, Sarah didn't know what to say. She had already said those hurtful words, and now she was too ashamed to consider staying here. "If you are hesitating or you don't know how to say it, then come here. If you come here, it means that you are willing to be my girlfriend." Sarah still looked at him, unsure of what to do. "I give you 3 seconds. 1. Charles stared at her and counted 2. Sarah finally plucked up her courage and said, "If you don't deceive me, I'd like to be your girlfriend." After saying it, her face became completely red. Seeing her red face, Charles was about to laugh, but he held it back, saying, "Come here." Sarah walked towards him slowly. Charles immediately pulled her into his arms and asked, "Are you sure you want to be my girlfriend?" Sarah was scared, but she didn't resist and said, "If you stop humiliating me, I am naturally willing to be your girlfriend." Hearing her words, Charles smiled and then kissed her. Sarah was surprised and wanted to push him away. However, before she could think, Charles pushed her against the wall and kissed her passionately. After a few moments, he let her go and smiled. "What an alluring woman you are." Sarah was completely shocked. She went to say something, but Charles interrupted, "I won't force you to sleep with me before you agree. But since you are my girlfriend, we can kiss, I suppose?" Sarah was silent. It seemed that he really did respect her. It was, of course, reasonable for a boyfriend to kiss and hug his girlfriend. Furthermore, when he kissed her, she felt genuinely happy, and she liked that feeling. Sarah subconsciously touched her lower lip, recalling the kiss that they had just shared. Charles observed her, smiled, and couldn't help but kiss her again. Sarah quickly pushed him away, saying, "Sir, we are in the office. There are lots of people outside. Besides, the door is open." "You mean we can continue if I close the door?" said Charles as he slowly closed the door shut. Sarah felt terribly shy, correcting him. "No, I don't mean that. Anyway, now we are in the company building. Please don't do this, and it's bad if others see us." Charles looked at her. "What's wrong with that? You're my girlfriend now. Even if I am your girlfriend, people may still look down upon it. If you want to do something with me, you should at least find a secret place." Charles laughed mischievously. "Well, you say that I can do anything as long as it's in secret. I will remember that." Sarah paused, unsure of what to say. Charles stopped teasing her and asked, "No, working overtime today. Let's have a meal together. What do you want to eat?" Anything is fine." Sarah was a little surprised. She had never thought that he would ask for her opinion. In the past, when she went out with him, he had never asked her what she wanted, so she had to eat whatever he ordered. Therefore, his attitude today made her uneasy. This was a rare opportunity. "We can eat anything I want?" she said. Charles nodded. "I want to eat some spicy food," said Sarah, assertively. Spicy food? No wonder. Sarah was confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. "What's the matter with me wanting something spicy? Do you see me as spicy?" "Usually you are not," Charles replied. "However, when you resist me in the bedroom, you can be very spicy indeed." "Why are you always thinking about that?" Sarah asked. Charles laughed out loud and answered quietly, "Not only that, but I also can't help but want to taste you." Charles looked cool, overbearing, and fickle, but as a lover, he was surprisingly gentle. He respected Sarah's opinion and always made a decision based upon what she wanted. This made Sarah feel like a genuine connection with Charles might actually be possible. It had never occurred to Sarah that Charles could be so tender and gentle. When they went out for a date, Charles always let her decide what she wanted and never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do. Charles gave her the feeling of romantic love, so Sarah thought that maybe she had misjudged him before. However, sometimes she became suspicious, wondering whether Charles was gentle to every woman that he interacted with and not just her. Did Charles truly love her? She tried to gauge the answer from his eyes, but she was unable to read him. In her presence, Charles was very tender and affectionate, which confused her even further. Sarah knew that Charles was fickle in love, and it wasn't easy for him to truly fall in love with a woman. On the other hand, she couldn't fathom why he would only pretend to be affectionate to her. Charles was very high profile. It seemed that he was happy to let their love be public. Every day he picked her up and stayed with her, which made their relationship quickly known by everyone in the company. Everyone now knew that Sarah was their president's girlfriend. This all made Sarah a little embarrassed because she was used to keeping a low profile. All in all, their love had a bad influence on the dynamic of the company. But Charles didn't care about that. Perhaps the notion of romantic privacy was, in fact, the one thing that Charles didn't respect her opinion on. Sometimes Charles would buy an enormous bunch of flowers for her, which were so big that even her entire desk was unusable. Women envied Sarah when they saw Charles' extravagant romantic gestures and would whisper about it privately amongst themselves. Sarah couldn't refuse his gestures, of course, as Charles was too overbearing. Moreover, she enjoyed it, because she felt that above all, it was really sweet to be loved by someone. Sarah's birthday was in a few days. As it happened, she was really looking forward to this birthday. Since her younger sister studied in another city, she had always celebrated her birthday on her own before. Even though there were one or two friends around, she still felt alone when she came home and saw her empty room. But this time was different. She had Charles, who could accompany her. In fact, the only thing she wanted was to be accompanied by someone. Therefore, Sarah was particularly excited about this birthday. However, several days before her birthday, Charles had not signaled that he had made any plans. No matter how often Sarah reminded him, he still couldn't remember her birthday. Even on the day of her birthday, Charles had not made any plans, and Sarah hadn't received even a single flower from him. Charles was very busy during the day, which upset Sarah immensely. However, she couldn't complain because Charles was a CEO and had an enormous number of things to do every day. It was expected that sometimes he would ignore her, but she still felt so upset. Perhaps it was because he had treated her so well before that she had now grown to expect too much of him. After work, Charles still stayed in his office. Sarah called him, only to be told, "You can go home first. I still have work to do." Holding the phone, Sarah tried to hide her sadness, asking, "Charles, do you know what day it is today?" "What do you mean, what day is it today? September 1st? Teacher's Day?" "No, Teacher's Day is on October 1st. The Mid-Autumn Festival? No, it's not. The Mid-Autumn Festival is in a week's time." "What day is it today then?" Understanding that he had completely forgotten, Sarah was heartbroken and said, "Nothing. You are so busy and I won't disturb you anymore." After hanging up the phone, she went home alone. Once she was home, Sarah sat down on the sofa. Seeing the empty room and the clock on the wall, she felt even lonelier on this birthday than in the past. She had never expected anything before, so it was not so sad. This time, however, she had expected something from Charles, and he had let her down. Sarah checked the clock on the wall. It was nearly 2013, which was the time that she was born. Obviously, it was a time that should be full of happiness and excitement, but she was still alone. She felt so disappointed. The minute hand finally pointed to 13. Suddenly, Sarah's phone rang. Could it be Charles? Did he want to give her a surprise? Thinking this, Sarah excitedly picked up the phone, only to discover that the caller was not Charles, but her younger sister. The only one who always remembered her birthday was her sister. She pretended to be happy as she answered the phone. Hello, Sophia. My dear sister, happy birthday to you. Well, I always call you at the right time, aren't I so considerate? Ha ha. Hearing her sister's laughter made Sarah smile slightly. Yes, you are very considerate. Ha ha. She felt so warm when she was on the phone with her sister. However, as soon as she thought about Charles, she was suddenly overwhelmed with sadness again. At this moment, to Sarah's amazement, fireworks suddenly burst in the sky outside the window, displaying a message, "Happy birthday, Sarah."